Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. So I will start to share one good news and one bad news. So the good news is that humanity today are living in our kick-ass era. Never before have humans had such a great time at the planet as today. Measured in terms of access to education, access to energy, access to food, and so on and so forth, you see that we have had a tremendous development over the last decades. Not least due to what have happened in China, where millions of people have been brought from poverty and into an economy. So that is just a perspective to have in mind when we start. Then obviously it's also very, very clear, and we heard from Johan earlier today, that this prosperity has come with a great cost. We have lost about 50% of our biodiversity over the last 40, 50 years in ocean, on land. This picture here is from Beijing. So I lived in China for 5 years, and you have all been traveling in the big cities, in particular in Far East. You cannot drink the water. You can taste the air. And it's kind of obvious for us that to accommodate then a growth of maybe 2 billion more people over the next 30 years, a middle class growing with about the same numbers, the existing infrastructure on how we have organized our society will be challenged. So that is kind of, as an introduction, the good and the bad news in the world we live today. And we learned this morning also on how this is really pushing the boundary, the planetary boundary. In DNV GL, we are working in more than 100 countries, 400 offices around the world, and we see that what happened in 2015 changed the framework. We got the Paris Agreement, we got the Sustainable Development Goals, and from the business side, we clearly see that these two global frameworks really has started to have tremendous effect. Maybe not enough, maybe not fast enough, but what we call the green shift in Norway, I would like to translate to a green race in many other countries. So policy is affected, regulation is affected, but for me the most optimistic part of it is that the business sector really are embracing the 17 goals, are curious about the goals, incorporate the goals in strategy development, in business development, in communication, in recruitments. I mean, today, to run a global business, it's not only to interview young candidates, because the young candidates more and more interview us. And they ask the right questions, the difficult question, you know, if I start working for you, how can I contribute to solve some of these social problems? So this is also to be attractive as an employer. So I think that is a very good news. And in DNV GL, we normally do, you know, independent assessments. So with a vision of global impact for a safe and sustainable future, these 17 goals was really a gift for us as a company, because suddenly we could say that this is basically how our safe and sustainable future look like. The other thing which was good is that it is time limited. It is 2030. It is 12 years from now. It is less than 5,000 days. So we really need to move in order to reach the goals. So the first thing we did was to do an assessment of these goals. So we launched a report in 2016. We call it The Future of Spaceship Earth. It was basically inspired by Jørgen Randers, who challenged us and said, you know, in 2014 you have classified ships for 150 years. Now you have to look at the biggest ship as the all. So we went for the Spaceship Earth. So what we did was basically to do a prediction of the future. So we built a system dynamic model. And then we did an assessment in 2030 about the likelihood of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. So you will see we have divided the world in 5 different regions. So we have the US, the OECD without US, China, BRICE, which is Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and 10 other growing economies, and then the rest of the world. And red means that we most likely will not reach the goal. Green means that we most likely will reach the goal. And the yellow then is that we are somewhere in between. And our motivation of doing this is basically to interact with our customer base. We have more than 100,000 customers, and we challenge the business sector to help us to do extraordinary action to green this scorecard year by year until 2030. So what is the key findings in the scorecard? Well, where I started, that humanity has had a tremendous good development over the last decades, will continue. Access to education, access to water, and the kind of the social and human-centered goals are basically green or orange. But it is 2 areas which distinguished themselves with and are red all the way through. So you see goal number 10 on the inequality. The goal said we want to reduce it. The reality is that it is red throughout. So rich people are getting richer, and to some extent, rich countries are getting richer. So we are kind of growing the inequalities. And then goal number 13 on climate action, also red throughout. So these 2 are red throughout. And of course, for goal number 10, it's not kind of very clear how to kind of work on that. Companies like Telenor, for instance, are doing a lot there to give people access to information, education, knowledge, and so on, to contribute to that. But for goal number 13, it is clearer, because basically we know what to do. We know that we have to change our energy system from a fossil-based system to a renewable system. And the other good news is that basically we have most of the technologies to do it as well. So we know what to do, we know how to do it, but probably we lack the will to do it. But anyway, for us, that kind of inspired us to have a deep dive into the area of energy. Because up to last year, we had been relying on analysis from IEA, oil companies, and other organizations doing projection of the future, in particular on energy. And we have seen that some of these analysis has been a little bit flavored of not what can happen, but maybe what the organization making it would like to happen. So we thought that being an independent organization, we should also make an independent view on the energy future. And we launched our first energy transition outlook in September 2017. And we will launch our next update in end of August this year. So let me give you a few insights into that analysis. And for this analysis as well, we have had a great collaboration with BI and of course Jørgen in particular, who have guided our work. So first and foremost, we are not making scenarios. We are not saying that, this can happen or that can happen. We have said that we have just one view on the future. So what we present is what we think most likely will happen. And we do a This is all modeled, so it's model-based. It is kind of bottom-up and top-down. So it's basically all into a transparent model. So the first kind of observation is that we have today about 80% fossil, based energy system, 20% renewable. And you see towards 2050, this will change to about 50-50. The other observation you should see is that we see that the total energy demand is plateauing and flattening out about 2030. So I will come back to that, but that means in reality that despite the global population growing to about 9 billion people, despite growth in the middle class, we see that energy efficiency are kind of counteracting this, so the total energy demand is flattening out. And this is, of course, different than what you see in other analysis, and what you see also in politics statements here in Norway, where we kind of predict that everything will kind of grow in terms of energy. So this is the first key finding. The second is the mix of the different carriers. So you would see that obviously solar and wind are taking more and more space in the mix going forward. We predict that the demand for oil will start to flat out in 2022, be about flat until 2030, and then the demand will slow down. Coal have already peaked, while gas will grow until 2035, and then you will see flattening out and a reduction. So that is how the different carriers will develop going forward as far as we see it. When you see on the different sectors, you see the main sectors are mainly constant, but obviously the mix within them change considerably. So the mix within transportation will definitely change a lot going forward, where we move more and more on renewable and more on electricity. And electricity is kind of a keyword in our analysis. So today, when you look at the carriers, you will see that 80% is on electricity. In our analysis, this will grow to 40% in 2050. So our society is getting more and more electrified. And of course, this is not new. This has happened over the last century, but it's just that it is taking more and more speed. And that is a good news. As the cars, as the ships, as more and more systems are moving on to electric, we have much more efficiency. And the combination of renewable energy and more electrification is basically what is the key behind the kind of plateauing of the energy, global energy demand. Today, we make electricity based on coal plants in many places of the world. And that has about 35, maybe up to 40% efficiency. When you make electricity based on renewable energy, it's close to 100%. So it is far more efficient. An electric car is maybe 4 times more efficient than a traditional car. So as we electrify more and more, we take out much more efficiency. And the transportation sector is definitely a key in this. It's a great consumer of oil today. It will be electrified as we speak. This is our analysis of uptake of electric cars. So you see the curve in the middle, meaning that is the kind of the average uptake, saying that in 2035, our prediction is that 50% of all new cars sold worldwide will be electric. And then you see for Europe, it will come a little bit before, and some other regions a little bit later. But in average, it's about 50% in 2035. And then we see great development on buses, on trucks, still in the beginning, but it is moving fast. In Oslo, we now have 5 electric buses. Shenzhen in China, somebody who have been there? So how many buses do they have in Shenzhen, electric? Yeah, 16,000 actually. And that is what is about to happen now. And obviously, as soon as you start to use an electric bus in a city, you see so many co-benefits. Noise, pollution, it's silent, everything. So this, I think we will see a big shift going forward. I was in Mexico in this World Business Council for Sustainable Development meeting last November. We had all the big manufacturers of cars in the same room. So they said it's 2 things we are thinking about now. First and foremost, how to go electric with all our products. Secondly, we are looking for the next Norway. So the next country who are setting policy incentives in place in order to really get a scale up of this new technology. So this will happen. So in conclusion, what we see is that due to more renewable energy, due to more electrification, we see that the energy efficiency until 2030 will increase with about 140%. And that will overtake the growth in global economic, which will then at the same time be about 130%. So we see this decoupling coming much clearer into the world economy. We saw it in Sweden, but we will see that more and more, where the energy-related CO2 emissions will decoupled from the global economic growth. This has been very closely coupled until about this time, 2015, 2016, 2017, and we see it will decoupling going forward. And that is a very good news. And I would hope that I could see that this is enough. But I have to end on a somewhat bad news again, because despite this, we see that our carbon budget will exceed their limit in about 2040, 2041. It's about 20 years from now. And again, our analysis is not what we hope to happen, but it is what we think is most likely to happen. And again, we bring this analysis back into the business sector, and we encourage them to do more. We encourage them to really see opportunities in this green shift. I see more and more business leaders, I see more and more businesses who really see these opportunities. And we will continue to update this analysis every year. We would like to have your comments, your input, and collaborate to get this as good as possible. So I think in summary, we see a lot of great developments, but the shift is not going fast enough. And I think that is my call to action to everybody, to rethink how we can do more, everybody from where we are, and how we can collaborate more in order to make this to happen. Thank you so much for your attention.